Welcome to this session, which is called Sorting Out the Paperwork, Budgets, Contracts and Consents. You'll know who I am by now, so that's all good. We don't have to do that. You won't know Jen, though. Jen is a partner with Anderson Lloyd Lawyers, and she's based here in Christchurch. She has over 15 years' experience as a resource management lawyer, having practiced in the specialist area in New Zealand and the UK, and she holds a first-class honours degree in history from the University of Otago. Jane has for a number of years been advising the Art and Industry Trust, and she's been responsible for consenting the permanent artworks along High Street that we've been involved with. And Jen is also a trustee on the Arts Centre Board, and I was on the Arts Centre Board with her. So Jen has been incredibly helpful in making sure that we can find the path through, legally necessary, to do some of these big works, but also find the path through for a lot of the temporary works that we do. So Jen is going to do a case study on a permanent and a temporary work and what's involved with that. A lot of what I'll be drawing from is really in your resource kit, which you've got in front of you, and we can go through it sort of step by step. But then at the end of our session today, we're going to play you a short video from an artist's perspective, because I think it's really important to hear not just from the bureaucrat, which is me, the organiser, the lawyer, but also to hear from the artist as well, from his perspective of working, and that's Anton Parsons, Making Passing Time. Okay, so, Maestro. Okay. So the first part is really to take you through a sort of a 10-step process for commissioning art. So firstly, the opportunity is either identified by yourself, if you're doing a project, if you're self-initiating. And then one of the things that we work very closely with Sophie on, is Sophie, our intern, is in this session, was on developing a proposal. What does a good proposal need? What really makes your project, what makes you sell it to Creative New Zealand, what makes you sell it to multiple stakeholders who are going to be involved, what makes you, really set that idea into motion and get it underway. So we're going to go through the steps of that as well. We're going to go through a little bit of the steps of what happens when you submit your proposal, what happens to it, where do you have to go to ask people about use of public space and that kind of thing. And then we're going to talk about some of the resource consent issues as well. What's the difference between a resource consent and a building consent? And again, there's lots of useful information in that pack that we produce for you on that. And then we want to talk about fabrication and installation and what makes a good budget. So we've got quite a lot of lists and stuff that we're going to be flipping between, and you've got your books in front of you, so we want to make it as interactive as possible, so that you've got those tools at the end of the session to go away with and think about in your own practice. Okay, so these are the steps that we need to go through to put together a proposal. So a conceptual outline is really important. And if you go to page 69 of your little booklet, Sophie has pre-prepared something earlier, which is fabulous, which takes you through paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So have a look at those helpful tips. We think that they look pretty good from receiving something, and Sophie's helped test that with us. So that's just some tips on that. And you've heard from Creative New Zealand earlier, they don't want any more than 500 words, so this is just another bit of the same but different. In terms of the next step in the process, it's visual presentation of your concept. Really, really important, particularly when you're doing public work, because how do you tell people about your idea? And we think the best way to tell people about your idea is through a montage. Take a photograph of the site and then superimpose. I'm sure you're all really, really good at Mac, and you can do this really easily, or whatever these days, and make it sell the dream, sell the picture of what you think your work will look like on that space. It helps you to get the scale right. Some artists like to make a maquette first, like a scale model of the sculpture. Neil Dawson does that a lot, and then he photographs his work and then he inserts it into the space. But you don't need to do that. If you want to do that, you can do that. So the next thing that's really important is to have an elevation drawing, and here's an architectural elevation showing you the front, side, back of the artwork drawn to scale, so that when you need to take that to other people to start thinking about costing it, engineering it, etc., you've got an indication of that. the next step, which is really important in terms of public approval process, is a site plan. This is a site plan here for our hub, which we were going to place into Cathedral Square. It's a bird's eye view, basically, looking down as to where that hub is going to be. So you can see those 3 red boxes there. That's our 3 hubs that we were putting in there. You can see the blue circle in the middle. That is Chalice. And you can see the other dotted circle around the outside. That was under the plan, the city plan, the distance we needed to be from the Chalice legally. The other thing about having this plan that's really important is when you go to council and you submit it, they will then put it into their system and they tell all the necessary people that are involved with that space, from the cleaners, the road cleaners, to the markets that were set up in the square, when you were going to be there, what you were going to do. That was your little patch. That's our little patch of public space. So really important to have one of those when you're working in public space. You don't have to have a fancy one like this. You can do it from Google Maps if you want. Google Maps is pretty good. But if you're working with a council, we definitely recommend that you ask the council for their plan, because they should know their plan. And if you're going to dig something up underneath the ground, then you ask them for their plan, because, again, they should know where the electricity, power, water supply is, because you don't want to dig into any of that. Okay, next step is a time frame. Be realistic. Really, really think through all the steps. And there's some tips in the document again on 72 and 73. So we reckon, looking through all those stages there, and from our experience of stage 1, and you can see what they are, I'm not going to read them out, right through those steps, to getting your project actually approved to go to construction phase, we reckon it's about 22 to 35 weeks. So it does take a lot of time, depending on the complexity of your work. But still plan for a lot of time, and plan for contingency time as well, because some things can go wrong along the way and you have to renegotiate, etc., etc. And then the next phase, in terms of fabrication implementation, very important to take account of the lead time for materials. You know, when you order some materials, if you've got something opening on a D date, you want to be able to say to the people, can you deliver it on, or how long will it take you to get that in stock or whatever. So, I mean, just plan for that into it as well. Fabricating, you might be working with a range of different people to make different components of your work, so you need to take account of that. Installation, again, I think Coralie talked in her session about being in public space, and when you're in public space, then everybody's watching what you do. It's quite different than being in your studio, so be prepared. Have a plan when you're in public space, and have a health and safety plan as well, really important, that you consider, you know, if you've got people climbing up a ladder, you know, that they're in the right place and they're doing that. They're not putting anyone at risk as well. So try and minimise the time that you're on the public space if you're actually constructing something large around that. And there might be lighting too, so we've taken account for that. So that's taking us to about 27 to 54 weeks. Wow, that's nearly a year. And some of them can take longer as well. But even the smaller projects, you know, more discrete projects, they can also take a lot of time, because it's particularly if you need to get permissions and approvals. The budget. I'm not going to go through all those items, but on 75 there, page 75, you've got a list of what we reckon you might need in a budget. And what we're suggesting is that you actually set that out on a table, like on the next page, and Creative New Zealand have given you a template as well, but this is our template that we use, which is setting out the description, which is the item that you're actually costing, the supplier, the name of the person that you're getting the supply from, the number of units of that, the quantity, the rate, and you list that all out. Everything that you can think of that you might need for your project. You might need, for instance, this is based on that waiting for a bus artwork which you saw earlier. We've taken account of absolutely everything we thought we'd need. Flights for the artist, accommodation, 7 nights. Daily cleaning, that was every day that it was in public space we needed a cleaner, so we put that in, security, insurances, etc. So once you've got that big list and you feel comfortable with that, then what you can do is you can start doing a little bit of the sort of brokering and negotiating that Bob talked about earlier this morning. You might find a company that can help you with one of those items, and you can pop that in the in-kind section. You can go, okay, that's sorted. You might find that creative communities, when you have your pre-discussion with them, about your application. They might be able to help you with some of these things. So you slowly and incrementally can work through it that way. You might find that, I don't know, your neighbour wants to give you something, or your mum and dad might want to be able to help you with something, but it just gives you a plan that you can then work to, and it also gives you surety that you've got something concrete to work towards. Okay. Other things to include in your proposal is images of previous work, and again on page 77 there's a sample of how to label your work, really important, titling and things like that. It's good practice to get in to do that with your titling and things of work, and a selected exhibitions and biography, which again Sophie has very kindly prepared ahead, and that's on page 78 in there, a template, a guide. I think you don't have to include all of your projects, but if you're going to put forward a project in a particular style and you've been working through some works like that, it's quite good to give some examples of works that are similar so that people can see that what you're doing, what you've been up to. Okay, so consenting and approvals. This is where Jen comes into play soon. But I think what I tried to understand when I was starting in this process is to get in my head very, very clearly what is the difference between a building consent and a resource consent. And we've tried to distill that into a couple of sentences. So really, resource consents are required for land use and any potential effects your artwork proposal may have to the environment. So that's that. And building consents are required for making sure your artwork is safe and complies with the building code. To check out if you require either of these, once you've got your proposal using the template, then you can go and sit down with council staff and seek the forms and get the advice. We recommend that you go and talk to them about that. They've got the resources for that. In terms of agreements, there's also quite a lot of information in the pack as well. Page 76. Can I get page 76 of that? So if you turn to that, so for each public art project, there's often many, many people involved. I mean, these are the ones of the scale that I'm talking about, but even smaller ones too. There can be different people involved: funders, site owners, sponsors, agent, eventual owner, your artistic collaborators. Really important to have those discussions early on about what people's roles are and expectations, and do that negotiation. And when you're entering into a contract with a gallery or someone like SCAPE or with the City Council on a project, then you just need to note that the current copyright registration awards the ownership of those rights to the commissioning body or the person commissioning the work, not the artist. And the artist might like to keep that, and in many cases they do, like artists like Neil Dawson and others, they want to keep copyright in their work, but the current legislation suggests otherwise. So what we're suggesting is that you actually check the agreements and the wording in them, but you can actually ask for those rights to be transferred to you as the artist. There is a precedent there for it, but you just need to check that, and there's just some tips on that there. And then on page 79 there's also a whole lot of other things that you need to think about when entering into contracts there. So if there are any questions about that or any of that information, please ask. I'm not a copyright lawyer. I can't tell you. Yeah.
And I should probably add, I deal with the consenting side of things, not the copyright side of things, but there are provisions for protecting your rights, whether it be through the contractual arrangement with the commissioning party or separately. But we'll check that point for you. It's a very valid issue.
Yeah, so if you're selling a painting, you just, as part of your settlement, you might write, please note
Yeah.
And that's about clarifying the relationship. Yeah, absolutely. And we've just done we've commissioned graffiti artists to paint the wall out the back of our warehouse because we used to be in the CBD and now we're in Addington. And there was this big white wall that needed something done with it for the staff, and the artist has done a little copyright sign and written their name. Yes. We will always acknowledge them through any promotional material that we use through our legal firm. But we haven't actually entered into a specific contract on that point.
Yeah.
So the area is a little bit grey, but I think if in doubt, record it. But the ideal situation is to ensure it's in a contract rather than simply noting on your art as a sort of general statement. I think would be a better way to do it.
Have you got an answer for that, Chloe? Yeah. So, for instance, the Christchurch City Council's current position is that they retain copyright and for works that they commission, but they have to take account of the moral rights of the artist. So they would have to utilise in any image that they reproduce the name of the artist, the title and the work and the date. So they take that position. I spoke to the Auckland Council last night at dinner, and they take a different position. They allow the artist to have retain the copyright, and they take some rights. They want the ability to be able to reproduce without going back and asking the artist each time. So they have a licence, and that's the position that SCAPE takes in our contracts as well. So I'm really only aware of public art legislation, so I'm not really... Yeah. 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 Good question. Hi.
Just wondering if this in the resource packet, if it is what page?
76, yep.
It's hard to read on the screen, but it is.
Yeah, it's in page 76, yep. So that's all there. Yeah. Okay, so over to you, Jen. Oh, this is just really my final slide to say, Bob talked this morning about Flower Power and Regan Gentry being a young artist. I mean, there are people around that can help you. The people that are willing to help if it's a good idea as well. So if you present your information in this way or go through these steps and make sure that you turn up, you show like you're professional with your portfolio and all of this stuff, and people really take notice of you and they think, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. We'll get in behind that. We know what they want. If you know what you're going to ask someone for, that's the first step, really, the first bit of advice I'd give. Yep.
I'm going to let Deborah do the technical side of things. Okay, so I'm Jen, and the last person you want to hear from today is a lawyer, especially after lunch. So it's not going to be boring, okay? So just building on what Deborah's had to say, I'm just going to talk to you about the issue of sorting out the paperwork with a particular focus on the consents and approvals. For those of you who were here yesterday, you would have heard from Hugh Nicholson from the City Council, great ally of ours, very in tune, he gets it. And as he said to you, you can sit round tables with bunches of bureaucrats applying rules when actually the plan may not cater for art, and that has been our experience in Christchurch for a few years working alongside the Art and Industry Trust, because we would find artwork classified as a sign or a building, and the rules don't really apply because you find you're over height or you're next to something, or it's not the kind of sign dimensions the city plan anticipates, and we find ourselves saying, but it's art, and it's meant to be noticed. We can't mitigate the effect or hide it. So that's the ongoing debate we've had with the council. We're getting into a really good space here in Christchurch now. So on that note, as you will all know, and we're very proud of this, to see the sort of three key permanent artworks for SCAPE standing tall in the city after the February earthquake. And we saw that as quite symbolic. And when Deborah, Bob and I were involved in the city plan hearings, we turned up and said, these are kind of beacons of hope. This is the new Christchurch that we can look forward to. And there's something quite special about it. There's a lot of destruction around these areas, yet they just carry on and they're there. And they're a reminder of what was before, but what the city can be as well. So you're at a really good time now to take advantage of that as artists. You've got a great opportunity to be part of the revitalisation of the city. So, turning to some of the written material, this is what the draft Central City Plan currently says, and as you probably know, it's been to the Minister, it's come back, and the Minister says, yep, love the vision, but I'd like another 100 days to write the rules, if there's going to be rules. So this is some of the stuff that's come out of Volume 1 of the City Plan. Key messages that may get us quite excited, things like the arts are central to the recovery of Christchurch economy and Canterbury. The arts are part of the beating heart of Central Christchurch. There's a really strong theme about arts being part of getting us back into town and interacting together. And you heard from Hugh yesterday talking about art plus public space equals public artwork, and how the artworks along High Street, speak to each other. And they create a conversation with each other, but also with the surroundings. That's really important because the transitional city and the permanent artwork provisions recognise that potential and how it can bring us all back into town. So in the city plan, there's conversations about temporary public artworks, programs and events, specific reference to SCAPE, but also the opportunity for artists to speak direct to council and say, I've got an idea, can I work with the landowner or can I work with the council to realise that? Permanent artwork also recognised. So Deborah's already talked to you about the approval process. These are some of the things you want to bear in mind. Make sure you've got enough time. With our experience with the biennials, we've always sort of gone to the wire in terms of the approval process, and there's a whole lot of stress because we've got Bob going, well, from an engineering point of view, it's going to take the artist this long to build it, and we're going, crikey, well, we still need the consent by this date, got to open on this date, and then a snowstorm or an earthquake comes along and buggers it up. But it's really important under normal circumstances to give yourself enough time because some of it will be out of your control once you get into the process. Who owns the site? Pretty important. Who are your neighbours? And that's dealing with issues that Hugh raised about the art speaking to the space around it and vice versa. That's actually relevant under the RMA because you've got to assess the effects on the environment, which is pretty much everything around it. So if you're going to shade a neighbour, for example, or if you're going to have a lit installation that is going to be very bright, what does that mean for the amenity of someone who may live there or work there or pass by? They're the sorts of things that the council will want to know about. You need to know what the zone is. Passing time, which we'll talk about shortly, is in a conservation zone because it's in the Wilson's Reserve. Doesn't kind of fit in terms of the rules, but the anticipated results from an environmental point of view for that area are actually quite positive. So the zoning's important because that drives what the rules are. Another example would be flower power. We had a real issue with that because it was classified as a building and it was way over height and it was in a pedestrian zone in High Street where you have your bus shelter and your seat, but not a big tall building. Again, we keep saying to the council, it's a piece of art, it's not a building. Yeah, but we don't have a definition of art, so we've got to treat it as such. So we pulled a bit of a swifty there and we chucked it in the road reserve. So it didn't actually need a resource consent at all. So all we needed to do was talk to the roading engineers about making sure there wasn't a traffic hazard, and when we installed it, we weren't digging up utilities or the old historic tram lines, those sorts of things. So you need to be creative. Test the council, push the boundaries a little bit, ask the right questions. Meet with council staff before you apply. Assuming all goes well, you get your consent, check the paperwork, read the conditions. You've got to meet them, otherwise you're breaching the Act, and that's not good because you have to come and talk to someone like me. Can you meet all the conditions? Pre, post installation, there may be remediation requirements if it's a temporary artwork. Think about that sort of stuff. Okay, so first case study, who watches the Watchman? SCAPE 2008. Some of you may recognise that building. It's the old post office building, site of Alice in Videoland, and the physics room. Interesting situation there, 2 RMA issues. Because the plan at that time didn't really define art, it was classified as a sign. And the dimensions under the plan didn't quite fit. Other problem, it's a heritage building. And as those of you who may know, in Christchurch it's quite tricky to do stuff with heritage. So you need to go and talk to the council and go, this isn't going to be a problem, it's temporary. The effect is not a bad thing, it's actually inviting people to look at a heritage asset, so that's a good thing. So those are the kind of issues we had to go back and forth to the council on, and the good news is we got that consent without having to go notified, i.e. out to the public, and it was processed in time. Permanent Artwork, the latest one, passing time, and you won't be able to see, but up on the right I think it says SCAPE Parade 8 March, and that would be 8 March 2011. Didn't happen. And you'll see when you see the video how close we were to have not got this in, because it was originally meant to be, I think, 7 September 2010. And it was on a truck ready to come down from Auckland. Just had to go into the warehouse. And then he sort of timed it, and Anton will tell you about this in the video, to install the week before the earthquake in February. So it's still there, cones, bit of water, probably a bit of liquefaction around it, standing tall. So that's pretty exciting for us that it's made it through and it's still there. So the issues with that one, as I said, conservation zone. The height limit for a building, again, was 5 metres, this was 6. There were also setback issues with the road reserve. The good news is we got written approval from the landowner, which was CPIT, because that would have really sucked if CPIT had said no. But the reason for that, it was a collaboration with CPIT and Christchurch City Council, so everyone was on board. And each time we do a biennial, the regulatory authorities are starting to become wiser to the issue, and there's a real appetite within council to facilitate public art. From the mayor down, everyone gets it now, so it's a really exciting time for us. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, a romp through some of the consenting issues. Read your pack. There's a lot of good stuff in there about the RMA process. Hopefully you won't need to come and talk to someone like me. Hopefully it all goes well. But make sure you talk to council staff before you get into it and commit too much time and money, because you need to make sure that the site works, you've got all your sort of boxes ticked in terms of process, so you don't get a nasty surprise at the end. So what I think we'd like to do now is run the video with our handy technical advisor. I think is going to help us do that, hopefully. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe we'll run the video, and if you want to have a few questions after that, it might be a good way of doing it, if people are happy with that.
My name's Anton Parsons. I am a sculptor. So an expression of interest, and then you put in a proposal, and then you get shortlisted, and then you go to the next stage of getting all the nuts and bolts sorted out, and how you're going to do it, and timelines, and all those sorts of things. So, yeah. So if you get the basic geometry, you send it to the engineer, they go, okay, yeah, that'll work. Okay. Then you get a computer CAD operator to render it in a three-dimensional like SolidWorks. Then you flat pattern it, so you basically get all those boxes and flatten them out. Each one of those boxes is made up of two separate pieces of stainless steel, which is laser cut. All the holes were cut at the same time. At the point of the CAD design, all the numbers are on as well. It was a minefield of information and which box went with which one and where the holes were, and just double checking to see we haven't put the holes in the wrong place. Anyway, and so once that's happened, they get folded with a CNC folder. They are welded together and polished and bashed and polished again, and then those boxes are all joined together onto the ribs or the frames into, we made 4 sections, so there were 4 arcs, and tacked all together and then assembled completely, and then welded, each one welded off. It's a bit mind-boggling. It's not exactly much fun. I don't actually enjoy that process, those parts of the process at all. But there's a lot of stuff you've got to do. But having said that, there are certain compensations that the council make because they understand that it's not like a dwelling or a building, so it's kind of unique in that respect. So it's kind of hard to, but it has to conform. It does have to conform to the building code. That's what it needs to do. So whatever the building code says, you've got to do. And also the welders, the engineers, the fabricators that made it have certain codes that they've got to conform to, and they've got to be ticketed and all those sorts of things so that the thing doesn't fall over and That sculpture is sitting, essentially it's sitting on a big concrete slab, and because it's quite large, I think it's like, I can't even remember how big it is, 6 by 4 or something, and basically it just stops it from moving. Having said that, I reckon if I did this again now, the foundation design would change quite significantly. No, I engaged an engineer to specify what that foundation should be, and he seemed to get it right, so as we've seen. It just needs to be washed, basically. If you don't wash stainless steel, what happens is it looks like it's rusting, but it's not. It's just that there's contaminants which sit on the surface of the stainless steel and make it go brown. So you just got to keep washing those off. I mean, it depends what the work is. So, for example, Klaus Oldenburg, I've heard and read that some of his works are made out of fiberglass and they're painted, and so they're really vulnerable to scratching. So he has in his contract that they have to be repainted every year, completely and utterly, and refurbished and made new again every single year. And if they don't do that, they can't have it and it's taken away. So, but his works are incredibly popular, so that's part of the contractual agreement that they come to, that they will maintain it. So each work's completely different. But even with stainless steel, there is actually things you have to do to stop it from deteriorating. So contrary to popular belief, stainless steel isn't stainless. I mean, the whole, there are a few obstacles apart from natural disasters, which are just generally par for the course, I suppose. It's just part of the process, finding a way through it. But yeah, there was a couple of earthquakes which stopped it going in, well, only once actually. I had everything in place for a September 7th installation. So the truck with the sculpture on it was meant to arrive on site on Tuesday, September the 7th. So I had loaded the sculpture on the truck in Auckland on Friday, September the 3rd, all ready to go, and then I got a phone call in the morning from a mother who said, maybe you should turn the TV on, and I did, and I saw that there was an earthquake, so the whole thing got canned. I then put the work then went into storage in South Auckland at the truck guy's place. So I installed it on the week of the 12th, I think. Yeah, I finished on the 18th. The Friday the 18th was the last time I was here. I flew out that night. So it was that week previous to that I installed it. And so it got pretty much all done. All the paving got done on the Monday the 21st. And then of course 22nd of February happened. So I was quite lucky in all respect. I could have, if I had of, if I had scheduled it another way, it could have been twice. So yes, earthquakes were the obstacle really. But that didn't actually stop the work from going in at the end. It was just delayed it, that's all.
Okay, so what do you think? Easy? You can do it. Might take a bit of time, but you can do it. Any questions? Any last questions or thoughts?
There is a city plan online, but I find it difficult to find the bits I need. So the best way is to get in touch with the council and just ring up and ask for the planning department and say, I'd like to speak to the duty planner. I have this location. If you've got the legal description, that helps, or the street address, and say to them, can you tell me what the zone is, and ask them to send you the page. There is actually a map with an index that you can search online, and then you go into each map and look at it. But there's more to it than just the zone. There's also other maps that apply in terms of special features like heritage, protected trees, those sorts of things. The other thing to bear in mind is that only deals with what's above ground. So you'll need to understand what rules, what maps the council holds in terms of drainage systems, telecoms and things like that. But best first step is to ring the council and ask for the duty planner. Have a crack on the website, but it's probably better to go straight there. Yep.
Yeah. Certainly doing the smaller works means that we're often able to do things that are a bit more ambitious. So you saw this morning the work of Tatsu Uzu that Bob Blythe talked about. The only reason we were able to do that was because it was temporary. We were going to fix it up and go away and do everything that the plan, the consent that we got said we'd do, have a conservator there, fix the crack in his toe, all of that stuff. That was the only reason we could do that. So it's coupled with time and resource and money, but it's also coupled with doing things more ambitiously. So sometimes, we did a work with Reb and Patterson outside Riccarton House in Bush, a heritage-listed house, and we put a big swirling moat with, Reb and Patterson, big swirling black and white, and that was the heritage-listed house again. So it's easier to get consent for temporary stuff, and it goes away. So people are more accepting. Yes. might have to refer to Bob Blythe on this one, but the temporary art has to be built to the same standard as permanent art. It still complies to the building code, so it still has to be safe. And Neil Dawson often says that, doing a temporary project is as difficult as doing a permanent project because you've got to go through the same process as well from a health and safety point of view. Do you want to add to that, Bob?
Even in some of the temporary works, the forms to fill in don't give you everything. Flower Power, they wondered how many stories we had and whether we had wheelchair access. So, but that is the same form that is going all around the country. Yeah. It's not just a Christchurch form. But with the temporary ones, treat it as permanent. That's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, and what I would add from an RMA point of view, you might find it easier to get resource consent because that's about the environmental effect, not about the safety of the thing. So Bob's exactly right. You'll have the same tests for safety because if it's there for 8 weeks and it falls on someone, it's the same problem as if it's there for 10 years. But it might be easier to get consent for a temporary artwork under the Resource Management Act because that's more about the vibe, the amenity and glare and those sorts of issues as opposed to structural integrity.
Good questions. Is there anything else? Yeah. Yes, we are. And if you come back after the break, we've got one project which we're offering to you all to put forward design for, which is an empty blank wall. I think that this is a huge issue in the city, and we're all involved with, in different ways, making artworks to engage with the spaces, layer different meanings and things onto it. With SCAPE, I suppose we have that biennial format where we happen every 2 years for 6 weeks rather than doing an annual program. But what you will see that is a bit different with SCAPE is we're doing more of these sort of education things. We now have a team and quite a lot of specialists with us who are quite happy to, engage in this level as well with our education program. Yeah. Anything else?
You might find yourself ringing me. Not advisable, because presumably you want your art to be noticed. So if I notice it walking down the street, you can bet your bottom dollar a council officer will notice it. It will depend on the nature of the installation. You may find that you don't need a resource consent. It might be permitted under the city plan, but as Bob Blythe has just said, you're still going to need to comply with the building code, and even more so in Christchurch these days. And I think the challenge for the city is they're very keen to facilitate this, but the reality is there's going to be roads and infrastructure beneath the roads that needs to be rebuilt as we recover the CBD, so that the challenge is getting the art in, but allowing the rebuild to happen at the same time.
What we've been talking about in terms of these models is some quite big things, like, built stuff. But we have actually also done some projects where we've still had to seek permissions, but not at this highest level of building consent or resource consent. An example I will draw to is this hands, the stickers. There's still a lot of them around the city. You'll probably be able to spot them, and they're placed on council infrastructure like rubbish bins and power boxes and et cetera, so that, although that looks like a viral work, we asked permission and we got it, So there's precedent for these kind of works where the council's street team, street engineers, they said, yeah, that looks good, why not? Go on, do it. So that was good, and that was enough. That satisfied my board and my lawyers that that was going to be okay to do that. So sometimes that's why you really need to start with the council or the person who owns the land and then move from there in terms of the higher complexity of the work.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
It puts you off, doesn't it? I think you'll find from an RMA point of view, the resource consent issue will be much easier to deal with. And Bob's probably best to advise. It depends on what it is, whether it's got a building code compliance aspect to it, but I don't think you're going to get off scot-free. But there may be instances where you just go in and say, this is what I'm doing, and they go, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there'll be so many different ways of approaching it. It depends what it is. You know, once you've got your proposal together and you can go and talk to a group of people about exactly where you want to be on what day and you're doing what and you're moving from here. Say if it's a performance on an empty space, you still need to go and talk to the council or the owner of that empty space and tell them what you're doing, when you're doing it, and then have that consultation, and then they'll tell you if somebody else comes and mows the grass on that day and you can't do it on that day. So it's just like, you know, all those kind of practical things that you just have to talk through when you're co-opting other people's space, different from just doing it at home. So, yeah.
You may find it's just a matter of days to get it from start to finish if it's something like that, but we can't tell you until... Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they do have a good events team, and so, you know, there's people in the events team that you can go and talk to. So just phone up the council, like Jen said on that other question, ask for someone in the events team and just say that you want to come in, you've got an idea of what you want to do, and sit down with them, because they have a one-stop shop if it's a smaller scale work, and they should be able to help you through that. Yeah. They've got someone who's quite keen on art. Her name's Laura Taylor. Yeah.
Yeah, find the people who like art to talk to.
Yeah, they are,
Good.
aren't they? Yeah, good to hear.
And you don't necessarily have to pay for their time. Unless you're in a formal process, they can recover administrative costs for talking to you. But otherwise, if you just pop up at the front counter, you should be entitled to that service free.
Okay, well, that's the end of that session. I hope that's been useful. And do come back, because we're going to give out the briefs for the Resine Art in the Streets SCAPE Christchurch murals. We're just going to talk through that and just do a little bit of a wrap-up, a little bit of a thank you, and, yeah, conclusions. Have some afternoon tea.